Swahili or any other African language without teaching the culture at the same time. The language is a culture carrier. So Swahili carries a culture, right? And in this context where everybody gets caught up in European languages, they think like that. They become conceptually imprisoned in that language. But Swahili and other African languages frees us to think in different, more human ways, in dignity affirming, life enhancing, and world preserving ways of our ancestors. And so, what we look at Swahili, even how we say tutaonana. In English, I would
Mhm.
say, I'll see you later. But in Swahili, we must say, we will see each other later. Tutaonana, we must see. Or take, for example, how we talk about peace, because that's a theme this year too. Peace. Now, so look at the word for making peace in Swahili, patana. My patano is peacemaking. And so Mpatanishi is a peacemaker. And what is that word from? It is from the Swahili root pata, which means to get. But patana means getting together. So getting things together. So patana turns out to be, in practice, everyone getting something from this. That's how we make peace. Everyone has their share, right?
Mhm.
And we can never make peace if people don't have their share. And peace is so important to development. We can't develop without peace, right? We understand how it creates famine and chaos and mass death. And so what we must do is peace. As our sacred text,
Mhm.
Hosea of ancient Egypt said, exceedingly good is the practice of peace, and there is no blame for those who practice it. Exceedingly good is the presence and practice of peace, and there is no blame for those who practice it. And so I think it's very important for us to see how the language carries our values and they teach us to relate rightly in the world. You know, the Oduifa sacred text of our ancestors, the Yoruba, says that let's do things with joy, for surely humans have been divinely chosen to bring good into the world. And we say in Kawita philosophy, that's a fundamental mission and meaning of human life. And so when I started teaching Swahili, I wanted it to be a Pan-African practice. And so I created three major institutions from it. I created Kawita philosophy, I created Kwanzaa, and I created the Nguzo Saba. Now, Kawita is my philosophy. I chose to do these things in Swahili, to institutionalize them, not just claim them, but institutionalize them, make them part of the way we live our lives, do our work, and wage our struggle for liberation and ever higher level of human life. And so I first created this philosophy called Kawaida. I use the Swahili word Kawaida, which has many meanings to it. It means tradition, it means regularity, it means the usual, right? But it also means a standard. And I redefined it and expanded its meaning to mean both tradition and reason, so that we stand on tradition, but we always measure what we do, not only by tradition, but by a moral reasoning that asked us to bring forth the best of what it means to be African and human in the world. And so Kawida now means an ongoing synthesis of the best of African sensitivity, thought, and practice in constant exchange with the world. So we want to take the best of who we are from our culture, and our languages facilitate that. Our African languages facilitate that. And Swahili is key to that process. I created also the out of my philosophy, Kawaida, which is a revolutionary liberational philosophy. I created Kwanzaa, uh, a Pan-African holiday. And Kwanzaa um, is a first fruit celebration based on the first fruit celebration. And in fact, the most important model for me was Mkosi and the Zulu tradition, the 7-day holiday, right? And from that, I then used Kwanzaa to teach the Nguzo Saba. I created first Kawida. I created a family, a, 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 a group of values, a value system called Nguzo Saba, which in Swahili means 7 pillars. or 7 principles, right? The 7 principles, right? And these principles serve as a value system by which we ground ourselves, orient ourselves, and direct our life toward good and expansive end. And those values are first, umoja, unity, the first Pan-African value, right? We have to have unity. Without unity, nothing, right? So umoja, to strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, nation, and race, i.e. the world African community. Second principle, kujichagulia, self-determination, to define ourselves, to name ourselves, to create for ourselves, and to speak for ourselves, right? And then Ujima, collective working responsibility to build and maintain our community together and make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and to solve them together. Next, Ujamaa, cooperative economics, right? Right? To build and maintain our own stores, shops, and other businesses, and to profit from them together. Together, that value, shared goodness in the world, and inclusive goodness, widening the arc of, of sharing and good in the world, of shared good in the world, widening that arc of shared good in the world. And then near purpose, making our collective vocation the building and developing of our community in order to restore our people to their traditional greatness, right? And what do we mean by restore them to their traditional greatness? Not simply scientific and technological knowledge having or amassing wealth. That's not greatness that we're talking about. The Husia, the sacred text of our ancestors in the Nile Valley, ancient Egypt said, the wise are known by their wisdom, but the great are known by their good deeds. And that is why Nana means honored one from the Akan, Ghana. Martin Luther King said, everyone can be great because everyone can serve. And so we must learn service, and we learn it from our culture to serve, right? The ancient text says, serve God that he may protect and provide for you. Serve your brothers and sisters that you may be respected for it. Serve a wise person so that they can teach you wisdom. Serve one who serves you. Serve anyone so that you can benefit from it. And serve your mother and father so you can go forward and prosper. And so service, again, the culture teaches us, intimacy, right? We have to be. This is our duty to serve our people, to be a consistent servant of our people, a consistent servant. Right? So I think it's very important for us to see that. And then after that, after Nia, is Kuumba, the sixth principle, Kuumba, creativity. To do always as much as we can in the way we can in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than we inherit. And keep in mind, this community is both local, national, and international, the world African community we talk. And finally, Imani, faith, to believe with all our heart in our people, our parents, our teachers, our leaders, and in the righteousness and victory of our struggle. And those are the beautiful values. And I created Kwanzaa in order to introduce it. I created Kwanzaa for a lot of reasons. Number one, to contribute to the struggle, as we said, that struggle to be ourselves and to free ourselves. So Kwanzaa becomes first an act of freedom. It's an instrument of freedom, a celebration of freedom, and a practice of freedom. It's an act of freedom of self-determination because we didn't ask the government, local or national, to establish it. We established it ourselves and made it not only a national holiday, but an international holiday, a world African holiday, a Pan-African holiday. It is not only an act of self-determination and freedom, it is also an instrument of freedom because it teaches us to free ourselves from the culture imprisonment and the cultural values, the degrading values of our oppressors, the colonizers, the imperialists, the enslavers, right? And to think new thoughts, right? To break through the catechism of impossibility taught by the dominant and oppressive society. Think new thoughts. Imagine new ways to be African and human in the world and work to bring that beauty and good in the world. And so it's important. And then it was a celebration of freedom, celebration of ourselves, free from the conceptual imprisonment of the oppressor and thinking new thoughts and fighting new battles to expand the realm of freedom in the whole world. And then finally, of course, it is a practice of freedom. When we practice in Nguzo Saba, that is the practice of freedom. So that's the first reason I created Kwanzaa. Second was to reaffirm our rootedness in African culture. See, Swahili helps us to do that, reaffirm our rootedness in African culture. We have to return to our history and culture. Nana Haji Malcolm said the same thing. We have to have a culture revolution, right? We have to, in fact, be able to eliminate the thoughts in our mind that imprison us. As Nana Fanon, Frantz Fanon said the same thing. We don't want to just end colonialism. We want to put an end to the colonialized person. The person is colonized just like the land. We must free them. And our values contained in our language helps us to free ourselves so we can be ourselves and bring ourselves into the fullness of who we are and what we are to be. And so I think it's important for us to see that these things are very important. So the third thing is I created the next thing I created Kwanzaa for is to give us a time when we as African people all over the world could come together, reaffirm the beauty and meaning of Africanness in its best, right? What does it mean to be African? More than any other time, as you know, Africans all over the world, and Kwanzaa is celebrated all over the world on every continent in the world. More than any other time, Africans turn to being African, no matter where they are, on whatever continent they are. And they speak Swahili. They say the Swahili words. They listen to and think about the values communicated in this, especially in Nguzo Saba. And they try as best they can to make commitments to live into the best of what it means, to live a life which reflect the best of what it means to be African and human in the world. That's a beautiful concept. And finally, I created Kwanzaa in order to introduce the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles, communitarian African values, values that stress and strengthen family, community, and culture. And of course, that's the meaning of Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is a celebration of family, community, and culture. And so we instituted that. So those are some of the things I've done. I taught Swahili, of course, in many venues, community venues, academic venues. I've taught it on TV. I've taught it on radio. So I think it's very important for us to continue this. And I've taught this since the 60s.
Wow. Thank you very much, Professor Karenga. That was quite a lot for someone to process in a very short space of time. And that's why we're having this conversation. And that's why we want to have this knowledge so that we can share in our platform so that our young people can come across the information. There's a lot that I could have just engaged with what you just said, but for us not to make the conversation long unnecessarily, I'm just going to ask a few questions, and then we will have I don't want to disturb you. Just say things that are very, very important things that we need as Africa to just know where we are. Like you gave us a clear picture of how language can help us to see where we come from, where we are, and how we're going to go forward. Really, there isn't much that I can add on to just interfere with what you said. One thing that really I'm interested on is the fact that you came up with a value system. And in your conversation, you said language is a carrier of culture, right? And actually, I wrote down, this is the question that every young person will come across. I mean, when you talk about anything to do with Africa, they'll ask you, who is an African? I was so excited to hear that you are defining it, to say, who is an African or what is Pan-African? But out of love for you to go back a little bit deeper on that specific area, because I believe currently the biggest challenge that we have with our young people is identity crisis. And let it be young people in the diaspora or in the continent, we have a biggest challenge of identity crisis because of information overload. We have a lot of information on the internet, especially the urban youth. A lot of information in internet, and it's difficult for the young people to process the information when they don't have ground, like the Nguzo Saba. If they are not practicing values, if there are no Pan-African is helping them to hold them, because there's so much information on the take us a little bit deeper as to who is an African and what is Pan-African. I mean, when someone is talking about Pan-African, what is it that we expect from that person? Is it a lifestyle? Is it a movement? Because it's always confusing people. I know we are talking about Kiswahili, but you already set the standard and say language is the carrier of culture.
Right. So first of all, an African is a historical cultural community. We usually race because it has both, it's a phenotype and genotype, but it is also a community, right? A historically evolved community, right? And so we say it's not just a question of color, it's also culture and a commitment to that culture, right? And a practice of that culture. In fact, we said in the 60s, color, culture, and consciousness, right? So we can recognize you, but it's not enough for your color. There's some light black people and some dark white people. It's not enough. We have to ask ourselves, who are we in history, right? We know ourselves by our history and the culture that we bring to that history, right? But certainly I'm not going to dismiss the physical, but I don't want to just concentrate on that. So now, how do we talk about that? That's what we talked about in the 60s when we say we're African. We don't lose our Africanness. Let me talk about the diasporans first, because then I'm going to get to the continent. So we don't lose our Africanness. Maybe I should do the continent first. So there are three forms of African identity in the world today. One, and this is the first one, the historically evolved cultural community of Africans, right? They have ethnic names, but wherever they are, whether they're on the continent or in the diaspora, these are Africans that historically come from Africa and were rooted in Africa and have a culture to reflect their Africanness. Second way is to think about continental identity, so that whites or Arabs that come, they become Africans by continent, not by race, not by a historically evolved community of African people that are the original people, the fathers and mothers of humanity and human civilization. Not that. They come, they are migrants to Africa, right? To Europeans right now in South Africa, they say they're African. In fact, during the segregation period or the apartheid period, the Boers used to call themselves the Africans and call the Africans Boers, right? Bantu, I'm sorry, call the Africans Bantu, right? So it's very important to see how this has evolved. And I don't want people to pretend there's not an original African, right? There's an original African, and then there's Africans by continent. And then later, after the continent is named that, right? And people take on the name of the continent, there's also the national identity of African. So Zimbabwean, South African, right? Ghanaian, Ghanaian, right? Tanzanian, right? Those are all national African identities. So anybody living on the continent, anybody living in the country can call that, but it doesn't mean they're the same as the historically, culturally evolved community, the original people of Africa. Those are the three identities. And so one of the things that we must do is keep that culture. That's why in the 60s and even now, I taught that the key crisis in African life and Black life on the continent and in the world community is the culture crisis. And when I talk about culture crisis, I'm talking about, as you said earlier, a problem of identity, purpose, and direction, an identity